Have you ever carried a grudge so heavy it felt like it would crush you? What if letting go was the key, not just to peace, but to the freedom you've been searching for? There was a young man, 25 years old, who lived in a bustling city surrounded by noise, opportunity, and endless ambition. From the outside, his life seemed ordinary. He had a small apartment, a decent job, and a circle of acquaintances, but inside, he carried a storm. Every disappointment, every betrayal, every harsh word from the past clung to his heart like chains, and no amount of success or comfort seemed to loosen them. Each morning, he walked through crowded streets, but his mind was heavy. Faces blurred past him, but all he could see were memories of wrongs done to him, friends who had lied, colleagues who had betrayed trust, family members who had disappointed him. He carried these grudges like a backpack filled with stones, each step reminding him that the weight never eased. One evening, exhausted and restless, he wandered to a quiet park at the edge of the city. Under an old oak tree, he noticed a man, perhaps 60 years old, sitting calmly on a bench. His posture radiated serenity. His eyes held decades of untold stories, and there was an aura around him that seemed to hush the world itself. The young man hesitated, but then sat at a distance, unsure why the presence drew him so powerfully. The old man did not speak at first. He simply watched the city lights flicker through the trees, the sounds of life carrying faintly on the wind. After a long pause, he turned to the young man and said, "You seem heavy, carrying a weight no one gave you permission to bear." The young man stiffened, unsure what to say, yet the words struck him like lightning. Somehow, in this simple observation, he felt the burden he had carried all these years named aloud. For the first time, he felt understood without explanation. I suppose I am," he whispered. "I've been hurt. People have wronged me. I can't seem to let it go." The old man smiled, not with judgment, but with knowing. "Then perhaps it is not the world you need to change, but the chains within yourself. Forgiveness is not for them, it is for you. To free yourself is to choose peace over bitterness." The young man frowned. "But how? How do I forgive when I am still angry, when the pain feels fresh?" The old man's eyes twinkled. "Forgiveness is not forgetting, nor is it excusing. It is simply releasing the grip that holds you prisoner. Think of it like water trapped in a cup. If you refuse to pour it out, the cup will overflow with resentment. But when you let it flow, you make room for something else, calm, clarity, life itself." The young man listened, absorbing the words, yet the weight in his chest didn't lift immediately. For days he returned to that park, sitting in silence, watching the old man, listening to the city, observing the world without judgment. Slowly, the idea that forgiveness could be his own tool, not a concession to others, began to grow. One rainy afternoon, a memory surfaced, a friend who had betrayed him years ago. The anger surged, sharp and consuming. His fists clenched, his vision blurred. But then he remembered the old man's words. He imagined setting down the stones he carried, one by one, releasing the pain into the wind. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine. I will not let this control me any longer." It was not easy. Forgiveness was not a single act, but a practice, a daily choice. The young man found himself returning to memories, old grudges, and repeating the act of release. At first, it felt mechanical, like forcing a door open with stiff hinges. But slowly, a warmth began to grow in his chest, a quiet light that had nothing to do with others, and everything to do with the liberation of his own soul. As weeks turned to months, the young man's life began to shift. He noticed that he smiled more readily, that anxiety no longer clawed at his nights, that he could hear a criticism without flinching. Work became easier, not because circumstances changed, but because he no longer carried invisible weights that skewed his perception. His relationships deepened, not because people were perfect, but because he approached them without the shadows of past betrayals. One day he saw the old man again. He said, "I think I am beginning to understand. Forgiveness does not erase pain, but it makes me stronger. I feel lighter, freer." The old man nodded. Yes, the mind is a garden. Bitterness is a weed. Resentment is a thorn. Forgiveness is the sunlight and water that allows peace to grow. Tend to it every day, and you will be amazed at the harvest. The young man thought about his life, the arguments he had replayed, the anger he had nursed, the nights spent restless with thoughts of revenge. He realized that all this energy could have been spent on living, creating, loving. By forgiving, he reclaimed what had been stolen, not from others, but from himself. Over time, the city around him remained unchanged. The same crowds, the same noise, the same challenges. But within him, everything was different. He faced setbacks without bitterness. He experienced disappointment without despair. And when someone wronged him, he responded not with vengeance, but with clarity and calm. He walked the streets with a lightness he had never known. When children shouted and played near puddles, he smiled without irritation. When a colleague snapped in anger, he did not react with fire, but with patience. He discovered that freedom was not in controlling others, but in mastering himself. Years later, the young man returned to the park where it all began. The old man was gone, but the lessons lingered in every breeze, every rustling leaf. And in that quiet space, he understood fully. Forgiveness was not a gift for the people who hurt him. It was the key that unlocked peace, joy, and a life unburdened by the past. He carried this lesson into every part of his life. Old grudges faded like mist. Pain transformed into empathy. Anger became understanding. And with each act of forgiveness, he felt lighter, freer, and more alive than he had ever imagined. Forgiveness had become a superpower, not for the world, but for the heart. It allowed him to move forward, to love without fear, to dream without chains, and to live without the shadows of yesterday. And in this freedom, he discovered something even greater. The power to transform his life lay not in changing the past, but in how he chose to meet each moment, each person, and each challenge. Holding on to anger only prolongs suffering. Forgiveness is the bridge between pain and peace. True freedom begins when you release the chains of resentment. If this story inspired you, subscribe to Life Lessons Library for more tales that transform your perspective. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story that can change your life.